about its nuclear capability. That ambiguous policy has been protected by the United States for all these years. We know that when Kennedy tried to find out what was going on in Dimona, Ben-Gurion and his colleagues simply deceived them. And Kennedy decided...
Well, I don't understand what Israel's ambiguity about its nuclear policy is. I mean, everybody knows they have nuclear weapons. They just don't acknowledge it.
It isn't declared. It's not been
that's not
declared
ambiguity.
policy.
That's just simply denying.
Yes, but the thing is that, therefore, Israel has been able to have the United States backing to not become a major issue in the discussions of nuclear non-proliferation treaty. What has to happen is that the United States is engaged in a negotiation with Iran.
Right.
And in that negotiation with Iran, do we imagine that at some point the Iranians are going to accept these demands to give up its whole nuclear program and never raise the question of who has nuclear weapons?
They raise it every day.
They will make it a big issue.
They raise it every day.
That will get eventually onto Obama's plate. Right. And I'm saying that Obama has to talk to Mr. Netanyahu about what are the conditions under which I can continue to protect Israel from the demand of nuclear non-proliferation, which is a far more important issue to the future of Israel and its defense than anything regarding settlements. You, Mr. Netanyahu, you call yourself Mr. Defense. Are you going to be the first Israeli prime minister to lose this protection by the United States of Israel's nuclear capability? That would be an enormous mistake on the part of you and Israel in terms of its own national interest. And your colleagues will not accept that. You know that.
Where do you think the Arab world is today in terms of, they all are scared to death of Iran, to a person, to a country. You know, they very much would like to see, I would assume, the Israeli issue settled.
Totally.
What are they doing?
They're waiting and they're seeing, because they don't feel that they really are in a position to change the way the pieces are laid out on the table at the moment. They see America as the dominant power. They've been desperate to try and find other partners to try and involve in international diplomacy. They're very keen to develop better relations with China, for instance, diversify who they're talking to. But they recognize that it's America they're dealing with. And so they're trying to find a way to get America to be more of an honest broker, to be less of a threat. And it's those elements of Obama's message that I think have really resonated with Arab audiences, because they sense something different is happening in Washington now. There's a new engagement with the international community.
If I may say a word.
Yes, sir.
The main thing that the Arabs have to do, or should be doing, in order to make it possible for negotiations to take place, is for them to play a more positive role in resolving the struggle between Fatah and Hamas in the direction of being able to take a negotiating position.
Well, I think the Egyptians at least have tried to do that.
The Egyptians have tried. In fact, the Egyptians now are taking a very important step. They are no longer insisting that there be a national unity government between Fatah and Hamas, because they understand that a national unity government between Fatah and Hamas would not produce negotiation, because Israel would not negotiate with a government that included members of the cabinet who were from Hamas. And so instead what they're trying to do is to create simply a steering committee between Fatah and Hamas, which would allow two things to happen. One would be that Abu Mazen would be freed by that steering committee to begin a negotiation with Israel on the basis of his platform, which is the 1967 borders, full peace. And at the same time, he would use that steering committee together with Hamas in order to bring some aid to Hamas in Gaza, not to Hamas, but to Gaza, in order to start rebuilding the society. Because they are in terrible shape, and they know it, and they know that Hamas has delivered nothing to them, only the blow that they received last July, and it is a terrible blow. They still cannot recover from it.
What do you both think about the sort of long-range implications of the diminishing possibility of a two-state solution because of demographics?
That is clearly the big threat that's driving Israelis to reconsider the two-state solution. I think even those who are most committed to retaining the West Bank as part of a greater Israel are terrified that it will mean the undoing of the Jewish nature of the state. They want the land, but they do not want the people who live there, and yet there is no civilized way to dispense with the people. You can't have ethnic cleansing.
Is there a way that, I mean, the Israeli question always is about security. It's always about the proximity of missiles to Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. Is there any way that you can satisfy Israeli security needs and at the same time satisfy the nature of a Palestinian state that would serve as a model for the future?
You know, it's a really spurious argument, to be honest, because there's nothing about a Palestinian state that would pose a greater danger than the current intermixing of Palestinians and Israelis. I mean, it's the big fear of the suicide bomber that is the security issue that disturbs Israelis. And by not having a Palestinian state, that's not being prevented. In a sense, if you give people a viable future, a state in which their children will get an education, where there's a real job to be had, where you don't live under a shadow of fear of violence and you're not in occupation. You have taken away 99% of people's reasons for acting violently towards you. So, I mean, I've always thought the argument that there's a security concern there is putting the emphasis in entirely the wrong place.
With all due respect, I think that you're not thinking about the way that Israel has perceived the effect of the withdrawal from Gaza. What the Israelis see with the withdrawal from Gaza is the ability of Hamas to turn away from direct terrorist action into the use of weapons that can travel over the Israelis to very vulnerable parts of Israel.
Understood, Stephen, but the problem there was a unilateral withdrawal. In a sense, Israel handed Hamas a victory in Gaza.
There's no question
by seeming to withdraw without talking to anyone. And if the Israelis would simply negotiate with the people they've been occupying before they withdraw from territory, they'd spare themselves some headaches.
But you know whose argument that is? Benjamin Netanyahu. That the departure from Gaza should have been negotiated. You know that, Steve.
Absolutely, yes. But the question is, the Israelis have to be sure that if they negotiate a withdrawal with the Palestinian Authority, it will still be there as the ruler of the West Bank, because they know that they can get an agreement with Abu Mazen and Fatah that they do not want to go back to armed struggle. They're not interested in perpetuating the violence between Israel and the Palestinians. Hamas is the big question. And I think that there has to be a short-term answer, because Hamas is not yet ready to take the steps that the international community asks for. It is not mature enough as a political movement to make that big ideological shift.
Again, I disagree. I mean, the critical thing is, as a political party, they won an election. When they won the election, they were faced with a bunch of one-sided preconditions before anyone would deal with them.
That's true.
And the idea that, for instance, Hamas must renounce violence or recognize Israel's right to exist before Israel has renounced violence towards Hamas or recognized the Palestinian entity's right to exist seems to me to be precisely the kind of one-sided politics we must leave behind if we are serious about resolving the differences between Palestinians and Israelis. We have to create a level playing field.
Yeah, what I'm saying,
and we have to draw all the relevant parties into that playing field and put on the table the issues that separate them, because they're not that complicated at the end of the day, and we do know what the solution looks like. We've known that for a long time now.
Yes, I think that Israel, the Israeli majority, far majority, is willing to withdraw from the West Bank. But what it needs to do is to answer the question of the missiles, which may not emerge, even if there isn't a negotiation with Abu Mazen, that nobody else will be able to break the agreement. But Israel has to have a fallback position if it does break down. And I think it's not so hard to create that either. Mm-hmm. And that is by having foreign forces agreed to by both parties, who would make sure that missiles are not imported to the West Bank and are not deployed in the West Bank. I think in order to make that international force credible to the Israeli military and to the Israeli hardline right-wingers, it would have to include the United States in that NATO force. And that would be a very difficult decision, because the whole history of the Israeli-American relationship has been Israel proud of the fact that it's never had to have American boots on Israeli soil. But I think that at this point has become a secondary issue to the question of how Israel can withdraw.
Should it also be some kind of